guys, welcome back to an all-new episode of R&D Garage. I want to welcome all my new subscribers. Thank you guys so much for subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing my channel. And of course, everyone who's been following since the beginning, thank you. So today we are finally finishing the brakes on Blackberry here. We did the fronts, we did the rears. Now all that's left is to bleed them. And so I'm going to walk you guys through. This is going to be a super short video though. And man, it just takes us that much closer to actually driving her. And considering today, what is it, January 21st, 22nd, it's 74 degrees out. Yeah, thank you, global warming. I'll take it though. Okay guys, let's get busy. So bleeding your brakes is actually pretty simple. Here's step one. We go over to the master cylinder. Now the first thing you're gonna do is wipe everything down, because once you open it, you don't want all the crap falling back into the brake fluid. So we already did this, but I'm going to show you, obviously wipe it all down. And then what I like to do is put rags everywhere so that none of the brake fluid gets anywhere you care about on the car, paint, engine, what have you. So we have another little rag right here. I'm going to go ahead, open this, set the cap aside, and then we're going to pull out this little, looks like a little top hat, but it's like another little cap inside. And so give that a good wipe as well, because you do not want anything dirty going back into your clean brake fluid. So I'm going to set this aside. There we go. Okay, and now's the time you want to wipe just a little bit more, especially around the outside. There'll be some gunk there. And then disappear for a second here. We have a little mini vacuum. So this I've already performed, but basically you stick the hose in the hole, pretty simple, and start pumping away. So this is going to get all the used brake fluid out of the master cylinder, and basically, yeah, I mean, that's what it's there for, so that you can put in the fresh brake fluid. And the main reason, again, for the wipe down is that nothing gross or dirty is going to get onto your brakes through the system here. So, okay, let's move on. Okay. Now that everything is clean, it looks beautiful, we can fill in more brake fluid. Now, I'm not going to do this because we actually already did that part, but here's a little secret for you guys. And most of you probably already know this, especially if you've been in the car game mechanics for a while. But since it's such a small little canister to pour in the fluid, and this obviously goes glug, 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 take an awl, just poke a small, tiny little hole, and it won't run out as fast. Which you probably already knew, right? Good. Let's move on. Okay, now we're going to put this little cap back on, which is actually the filter to keep all the crap out. Bam. And now we're going to put the cap back on. So you'll notice it has an arrow pointing down, and it means basically pointing towards the front of the car. So that's how we're going to put it on. So kind of to the side, and then give it a good hard shove. It'll make kind of a solid thunk. Arrows pointing forward. We are good to go. Let's bleed. Well, no, not like that. Okay, here's a note for you guys. When you're bleeding the brakes, especially on this S2K here, check the master cylinder constantly as far as brake fluid level, because you want to make sure it doesn't empty itself, basically, because then you'll get air in your system and you'll have to start the whole process over again. And trust me, you don't want to do that. So remember, check the brake fluid level constantly. Now, just to make life more interesting, there are actually 3 ways you can bleed your brakes. There's two-person brake bleeding, where one, sits there, pumps the brakes, the other one does the bleeding. There's gravity bleeding, which we're also going to show you today. So we're going to do two-person bleeding and gravity bleeding, but there's also pressurized bleeding, which is a little funky. We have the mechanics to do it, and I'm not exactly going to show you. Maybe I'll pull out the machine and show you what it all looks like. But I find that third way is a little bit more trouble than it's worth. So again, we're going to show you two-person bleeding and gravity bleeding. I cannot talk today. I need another coffee. So all 3 brake bleeding processes use a bleeding bottle. This one's by Genesis, and I really like it because it has a magnet on the back that you can stick to either a body panel, to the rotor, anything magnetic, and it'll still stay straight, so you won't spill anything. Also, you'll see, the hose here, it actually reaches down all the way, which is super important because it won't send any air back through the system. And it has this little quick disconnect right here because, you know, not all the holes are the same. And sometimes you'll need a little bit smaller tubing or maybe a little bit bigger tubing. And so this is where that quick connect comes in, where you can fit your own piece of tubing right into the caliper. So we're good. Let's move on. One more word of advice about all this tubing. You want to make sure it's super dry and also on every connection super tight so that no air gets through whatsoever. This connection here, and again, this one also on the caliper has to be super duper tight, again, not to let any air in. So this is the general process of bleeding brakes with two people. So the person in the car is going to gently pump the brakes about 4 times, and then on the 5th time, they're going to hold the brake pedal all the way down. While they're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and loosen this and then tighten it. And that's going to get a whole bunch of fluid into the tubing and down into the bottle. And at first it may look a little brown, it's gonna have air bubbles. So basically you wanna get to the point over and over until it's super clean fluid, no air bubbles, and then you know you're ready to go. First step for gravity bleeding. This car is not set up for gravity bleeding. I wanna tell you that right now. So the car has to be either all the way on the floor or all 4 sides up on jacks. Basically, the car needs to be as level as possible. So the most important thing with gravity bleeding is don't let that master cylinder get low or empty. Super important. Okay, so with gravity bleeding, what you're gonna do is go to each of the 4 sides, but just do it one at a time. Adjust the wrench so that the contact point is loose, and let gravity do its work. So you'll know it'll be done when the fluid is clean and there's no air bubbles. It may take a little bit longer than bleeding brakes, but if you're by yourself, this is kind of a good way to go about it. So hopefully your next question is, well, what order should I go in? Because it's a very good question. Okay, so my handy dandy S2K manual, basically they say the bleeding sequence should be front left, and then front right, and then rear left. But honestly, with gravity bleeding, you always want to pick the side that's furthest from the master cylinder first, like passenger side rear. And then you're going to go ahead and do the other rear, and then you're going to do the passenger right, and then you're going to finish off with the driver's side. So I know people won't believe that this is the sequence right here, so I'm going to share a picture with you, but doing it either way works. Good question. And here we have pressure bleeding. You know, I can't in good faith recommend this option unless you're doing brake job after brake job after brake job, because basically this is what it consists of. You'll see this oversized tub full of brake fluid, not at the moment, and you'll notice it's got a pump, so it's highly pressurized. This side will go on the master cylinder, almost forgot what it was for a second, and basically you just keep pumping until the fluid is clear and you never have to worry about it running out because you've got like a freaking vat of it. This much pressurized brake fluid around your car, it just makes me nervous. I'm just not a real big fan of this, again, unless you're doing brake job after brake job, because also it's got this dual plate for, like, you know, the American V8s, and apparently you attach it with chains, and, you know, no. So this is why I always go for either bleeding brakes or gravity bleeding. So, yeah. So now I'm going to show you how to pump the brakes. Now, this is a job not for a kid. It has to be someone super attentive, because if you're back there on the wrench and maybe your kid or something like that does half a pump or pumps it all the way down to the floor or something, you could suck a lot of dirt back into your system. You don't want that. So get someone trustworthy, and I'm going to show you a little trick as well. So again, you don't want to push the brakes all the way clear to the floor. So what we did was put a little bit of PVC pipe in here. So it's kind of like a guide, you know, like use it as a guide so that you know the brake pedal isn't going that deep. And what you're going to do is just pump 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold until the person with the wrench tells you, okay, you can release. So again, it's a job to pay attention to. So a little bit of trivia for you guys. You'll notice this is like pretty brown and gross right now. Well, okay, ignore all that. Race teams usually use 2 different colors of brake fluid because they're constantly changing out the brake fluid while they're racing. And so maybe they'll start off with the blue, they'll bleed it all out. Once they see the gold, they know they're ready to go. So I just thought that was really cool. Unfortunately, we aren't able as street cars to get the 2 different colors because blue would be kind of awesome, but oh well. Okay, now we're gonna go through the process. So the first thing I'm gonna do is have D pump the brakes and then hold. D, go for it.
Holding.
And it's always important for them to say holding, because that's when you know it's the right time to go like this, and then again tighten. And then you can say release.
Release.
Okay, go for it. And so basically we're just doing this,
Holding.
thank you, until the fluid is clear and there's no air bubbles. Release.
Huh?
Okay, so that's kind of how simple this process is. So we're gonna keep doing this until it's all done. Okay guys, well, her brakes are finally done. Fronts, rears, bleeding, everything is done. So now's the point where you can take one last rub down of the rotor, make sure it's perfectly clean, put the rims and tires on, and you're good to go. But you're going to want to bed your pads. So check with the manufacturer, see what they suggest. You know, this is kind of like a series of hard stops, soft brakes, just all that kind of stuff. So again, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Check with the manufacturer. But I am going to go drive Blackberry now and fully break her in. Super excited. So as always, you guys, thanks so much for subscribing to R&D Garage. Remember to hit that button down below. Lots of good stuff coming up. And, oh, there's always going to be a puppy in my videos now. I mean, how cute is that? So again, thanks for watching this R&D Garage video, and we're going to be working on Grandpa next. It's very exciting. Very. Have a great week, you guys.